The world has never changed faster and will never change slower. Welcome to the We Are Future series, where we get to talk to global thought leaders and industry experts on all things digital, technology and innovation, and how it impacts the way we live, work, act and interact. Now tune in for those candid conversations and be part of creating the future of work.
Okay, so I have the lovely pleasure of welcoming Jean Garez to this talk series. And Jean is currently a Chief Strategy Officer at the Human-Centered Design Agency, which is a consultancy that's based in Brisbane. Square One is what it's called. He has a really strong background in management and innovation consulting, and that's essentially how we first connected. But Jean, I'd love to throw it to you and just give us a little bit more, background to where you've been or where you've come from and how you started working in this space.
Thank you, Genevieve, and thank you so much for having me. I think this is wonderful what you're doing, and I love the format, so accessible and portable. My legacy lives on, yes. I think my background is again, as you said, management and innovation consulting, usually around a technology framework. So it's always come back to some sort of technology, but it was trying to make things fit for purpose, and very much focused on bringing innovation and understanding the impact of those innovation has on changing the way we work. I did this in Europe. I've done this in Asia Pacific for many, many years. A little bit more now in Oceania and based here in Brisbane, as you mentioned. But I started off in marketing and consumer behavior research. So I have a love and a passion for data and collecting data and interacting with people. And it's something that I've always come back to in terms of the work that we do is having to look internally at businesses and structure and process, and understanding the customer and what that means for the business. So I suppose I see my role as helping to build a brighter future for what I like to call enlightened enterprise, or organizations that are looking to change for good, as well as for growth.
That's really good. And so in terms of what you're focusing on now, what have you seen to be, or what are the top 3 innovations or changes that you've seen that have made the most impact to what you've been working in, or the space that you've been working in?
I think impact probably is being driven by greater awareness in the market, and whether that has been adoption in other markets that is sort of flowing over into this market. Certainly Sydney and Melbourne have seen as cities are quite mature in customer experience, and that's flowing over now with people moving over to Brisbane, with organizations here and the government specifically putting a lot of focus behind that. And that's certainly helped with a mindset shift in terms of adoption of customer experience, employee experience, innovation.
Okay, great. And have you seen that impact to both customer experience and even the experience of businesses? Has that also had an impact on the way people are interacting? So consumer to business, business to consumer. Have you seen any differences there?
Listen, I think that it's an interesting question. I think the way that consumers' expectations have changed over time is probably what is driving businesses to rethink. Certainly what I've seen, a big shift was the change in certain industries in terms of financial services, superannuation, people being able to shift from one super to another.
Yeah.
Before that wasn't a concern for many of these superannuation funds, and that is now all of a sudden something that's available to the consumer, whether or not they want to do it or understand how to do it, that security of knowing that you have a fixed number of customers each year is causing a lot of organizations to start rethinking how important understanding the customer is. And you're seeing that in a lot of organizations where there is that potential for people to shift. So CX probably started first in the retail space, in the hospitality sector, where they had a deep appreciation for the importance of the customer. But now we're seeing it in government, where it was never before, and potentially not a lot of incentive to change or initiative or I guess stimulus to change, other than understanding that the importance of and also understanding changing behaviors in the consumer market, that the expectation is changing, and the younger generation and their expectations of services and how they are served in the consumer market, they want to see the same thing within the government and organizations that are offering them services across any industry, education included.
Yeah, cool. I think too, mentioning that before, you were saying you've seen a trend to businesses being a lot more mindful about the impacts they're making, and being, I guess, vehicles with purpose, not just in a commercial sense, but as in terms of making change happen. And so, do you think too? I think based on what you were just saying there in regards to the changes in what expectations customers or people are having, that has also been driven by that? Or would you say it was the other way around, where because businesses are becoming more like that consumers' expectations, or neither, no correlation at all?
Listen, I think certainly, I think there's a push and pull factor.
Yeah.
Technology is what has enabled us to be able to work faster and more productively. And that has led to a different expectation in terms of how quickly we work, how quickly we get things done. And now there's no excuse essentially for not being able to get good service when you do have some disruptors that are coming in with amazing tools and platforms that just make our lives so much easier. We start to think, why couldn't other bits in my life be easy? So there's still a lot of room for disruption, but ultimately, I think certainly early organizations that have started early in terms of focusing very specifically on consumers and customers and customer ease have been the early drivers. I mean, if you look at Apple, the whole issue, the whole enigma around that was a pure focus on customer. Although it was driven by one man's vision, it was still sort of centered around the customer and predicting a little bit what the customer wants and needs, but having a finger on the pulse of that. And now we have a generation that technology is ubiquitous to all aspects of their lives, and so we have to adapt and change. But my only thought in that is that we can't forget the principles of human-centered design, and what it was, where it was born in terms of human-centered services, was understanding the impact of technology, but recognizing that at the time in the 60s and 70s, it wasn't so easy to use. We still need to be able to make it such that we're not forgetting certain generations that are still in the workforce that need to use these and are afraid of change.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I wouldn't mind just talking a little bit more about human-centered design. It's not an area that potentially everyone is aware of or comfortable in. However, I think it's really important when we do talk about the future of work and looking to solve problems in the modern workplace or for the modern customer, that it's something that people understand the concepts of. Can you just elaborate a little bit more about that, or even give us an example of how that's being used and how it's shaping, redesigning or relooking at how we service from a business perspective?
Yes. So I think probably the simplest thing that people could identify with is a user interface. So thinking about how somebody uses a tool, an app, a website, and designing around making that easier, and something that delivers a value, meaning either saving time, whether it is performing a function in a more efficient manner, but delivering some form of value that is perceptible. But that is still very much a surface value. In human-centered design really does move and is moving much deeper in terms of wanting to really and looks at both internally and externally of an organization. In order to be truly customer-centric, we need to also be human-centered internally. Everybody has to be along the same journey. So if we use, let's say, Virgin as an example, the most important person for Virgin is their employee, because if the employee is happy, then they're productive. If they're productive, then they will make their customers happy. They'll be in a good mood, and that just cascades outwards. So it is somewhat of starting from the center, but customer experience is certainly a first place. And how do we design that? How do we understand it? Is using a methodology like human-centered design, which uses certain design thinking principles that focus around providing a framework for people to be creative. So that's I suppose it goes a little bit deeper than that, but the idea that we have been trained for so many years to follow a strict regimen around things that we've almost given up creativity. It's been formed out of us from when we were children, when we were encouraged to be creative, to all of a sudden now we need to be linear and prescriptive. So human-centered design opens up that option for us to start thinking a little bit more creatively again, but using it towards designing services and tools, bringing empathy into the equation, sort of understanding and putting ourselves in the customer's shoes. And human-centered design just provides a set of tools and a process for which to leverage those tools to deliver better value and greater services and solutions to customers and citizens.
Yeah, that's very cool. And Jean, I would love to know what you're personally most excited about when it comes to technology or innovation or change. Is there anything that you have been working on or have seen in the progress that you're excited about, either professionally or personally or both?
I'm kind of a Lime scooter geek, so
Really?
I'm a bit too old probably to jump on those things, but no, I mean it's a really simple thing, but this idea of mobility, both and is an amazing thing. So I'll park in the city somewhere, and then I'll jump on a Lime scooter to go to different meetings. That flexibility and that freedom certainly is something from a personal perspective I think is kind of cool. And also the ease in which I can connect, sign up to one or get one started and go. From a business perspective, I think the biggest change has really been around platforms or enterprise technology that has become simpler to use and simpler to understand. So this idea of user experience, of customer experience, of understanding who your user is and what they need to know and what they don't need to know, has led to platforms coming out that really simplify work without having to know, from a technical perspective, how to code, how to build things. We've moved from those character-based systems to more drag and drop, to now things just being easy for me to build myself, like a dashboard that I don't have to think about. All those things, the complexity in the background is something, it's a challenge, and it's a benefit, and it's a challenge as well. But people will forget that certain skills, and that's the whole thing about automation is going to change the way we work for the good, I think, but it also has with it some challenges.
Yeah, I always compare automation to be like when we learned how to drive a car, we learned to drive a manual car, and more manual cars aren't being produced, and it's all becoming automatic now. And so those of us that can drive both manual and automatic can appreciate how different the skills are when you're driving a manual car. But then there are some people who've never even had to go through that, let alone experience that. So, they can drive the car, it still gets the same outcome, but then there's obviously just some different skills that, put the mechanism all together.
Well, yes. So would you be able to text if you were still driving a manual car?
Yeah.
It's hard to change the gears, text, and hold the wheel.
So I mean, things are moving a lot quicker than, say, like the transition from manual to automatic. But that's a really good example that I think sometimes people can relate to personally. So I can absolutely resonate or relate to what you're saying there in terms of that's exciting and interesting to see how that progresses in the future. And for anyone that has been listening to this interview with you, Jean, and they'd love to connect with you and get more detail around any of the things that we've spoken about today, what would be the easiest way to get in touch?
I suppose LinkedIn is probably a great way to connect and message, but an email. So my name, Jean Garez, all one word, at square1.com.au. And I'm always happy we didn't really get a lot into employee experience and some of the initiatives that we're seeing in the market, but that's something we're passionate about in terms of the future of work and that inward looking trend that we're seeing with organizations that have gone the CX route and now have understood that they need to go further. I can talk about this for hours, so I appreciate the opportunity with your listeners. And I'm based in Brisbane, happy to speak and connect with anybody who's interested and likes to talk about it.
Yeah, great. Thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. And I'll make sure that we tag you and connect you with anyone that is interested in knowing more about Square One and also what you're doing in that space. So again, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day, won't you?
Thank you so much. You too.
And that wraps up another insightful conversation about the future of work. And now we want to hear from you. What was the biggest takeaway from this conversation? Make sure you share your learnings on LinkedIn and also tag our guest speakers. And of course, if you or somebody you know has some more interesting take on the future of work, send us an email to contact@wearefuture.com. Until next time, and keep creating the future of work.